Okay, welcome everyone to the Eden Central School District Budget Workshop. Today is March 27th, 2024. Thank you for joining us both in person and those who are with us online. Mrs. Feldman and I are going to do our best to explain where we are in terms of the budget as of today and offer some direction and suggestions for where we need to be in the next several weeks.
So some of the things we're going to talk about are staffing, some budgetary assumptions, budget analysis, taxes, closing the gap, reserves, and then the remaining calendar until the budget vote. So when we talk about staffing, I'm going to just go over it lightly, and then Mr. Sortisio is going to put some more information out there. These are potential decreases. We had some retirements, so this is mostly through attrition. Eden Elementary, 5th grade teacher, high school teacher for English language, a high school math teacher, a half-time high school social studies teacher, and one high school counselor, along with a freeze on all new positions.
Okay, so I want to take a minute just to go through each of those potential decreases, especially so the board can understand where I'm coming from philosophically. Please weigh in with any questions or concerns at anyone in the in-person audience. With the Eden Elementary teacher, we had a 5th grade teacher after a very wonderful career is retiring. And, really, primarily this position, because of the budget constraints, the recommendation is that we don't replace it. But I think it's important for the board and the community to understand that not replacing that 5th grade section would reduce our number of 5th grade sections from 5 to 4. There would be an increase in number of students per class. So they would go, the class sizes would go from about 18 to 23, which it's a difference. But I bring that up because I recall when I got here in 2020, the board had authorized an additional elementary level position in order to address some class size issues. And that position shifted forward as the bubble and whatever grade level it was moved upwards in grades as well. And I share that because I think it's an important philosophical component of our district. And I just want to make sure that the board understands what the ramifications of not replacing that 5th grade section would be. And if it's the board's desire that we maintain these lower class sizes, and you'll ask me to find another way to address the budgetary constraints that we have through FTEs, then I can do that as well. Okay. Any questions about that? Any thoughts about from the board?
How many 4th grade classes?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can find that out for you.
I know sports been, well, in the past, up to now, has always wanted to try to keep the class sizes smaller. I'm a proponent for it, but I guess it depends on what the options are.
Yeah. I'm not going to talk publicly about what another option is, but there is another option that would not have it would not impact class size. It would be a change. It certainly would be a change.
There's 5.
There's 5 4th grade sections as well. Okay.
5.
Yeah, that was the difference, is that they were evened out.
You
Yes.
mentioned there were 23 in a class.
There would be 23 in a class.
So when you entered, were there 23 in a class, or there were more than the class sizes were larger when you came?
What I was reflecting on, this is work that you had all done before I came to the district. Our class sizes in the elementary are between 17 and 19 at most, and that's partly reflective on the work that was done prior to my arrival.
Do you recall anyone on the board prior to making the class sizes smaller? How large were they? Anybody?
I think we can estimate that they're probably in the 23 to 24 range, just based on enrollment over the years.
And then I can tell you just by looking at the thing that once they get to 6th grade, though, there are only 4 teachers. So
Yeah, 6th grade is pretty standard. I believe 23 or 24 students per class. So what I'm saying is that I strongly feel we need a reduction in 1 FTE. And if it's the board's desire to maintain our smaller class sizes, then I will look elsewhere for that reduction. Okay. The high school English position and math position, there's been some concern that would lead to fewer course offerings. That's absolutely not the case. We will offer the same robust number of courses and types of courses and high level courses in both English and math. There will be fewer sections of Learning Lab that we currently have, but not. I certainly wouldn't consider anything that would be untenable or damaging to our students. So no changes in program. Class sizes will go up a bit, but I have to tell you, our high school class sizes are absolutely the smallest in the district by average. You know, you have some that are higher, some that are lower. And again, high school class size average should be significantly higher than what we have at the elementary level. Okay. So that's for ELA and math. It would require some folks in the math department in particular to teach some courses that maybe they're not as familiar with, but that happens every time there's a retirement. Every time there's a change, somebody needs to step forward and do something a little bit different. And oftentimes it's met with some excitement for the new challenge. Okay. So in the high school social studies position, we currently have a 0.5, a half-time teacher that solely teaches participation in government. And that's their full caseload. We have the smallest senior class. Next year will be our smallest senior class in, I don't know, maybe the history of the district. And therefore we just don't need that position next year. So I'm not recommending we eliminate it, but I'm recommending we don't fill it. Okay. Part-time positions are yearly appointments in our district. And so I'm recommending we don't fill it next year. Okay.
How low is the class size going to be for the senior class?
Say a little bit louder, please.
Yeah, how low is the class size going to be?
How low will the class size be?
Yeah.
In what level, in what area?
For the senior class.
Oh, about 75. Yeah. The counseling position it would be a pretty significant change at the secondary level. Currently, we have 1 middle school counselor and 2 counselors dedicated to the high school. Reducing that by a full FTE would leave 2 counselors for 6 through 12. Now that sounds alarming, and I agree that it's a significant change, but let me throw some math at you as well. Our current high school counselors have a caseload of about 185 students each. Okay. Our middle school counselor has about 295 students on his caseload. I will say again, from experience as a counselor at both levels, the work is different at both levels. It's incredibly important, but it's different. It's different work at middle school versus high school. Reducing to 2 counselors would give each of those counselors a caseload of 330 students. Very different from what we're used to. Okay? The National School Counseling Association recommends a ratio of 250 students per counselor. So we would be above that. The actual national average is 408 students per counselor. So we'd still be significantly below that. So this is one that we're going to have to think through. I do want you to know that Lori Gregory and I are working on a grant that would fund a counseling position. It's a competitive grant, and quite frankly, Eden doesn't do well in competitive grants because that's often based on socioeconomic status. So I'm not sure if we'll get that or not. Okay. And the last part, freeze on all new positions. We do have at least 1 position that we were looking to add to our inventory from Mrs. Feldman's office that we just put a freeze on yesterday. You can't add more when we know that we need to do better with less. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. Thanks.
So we're going to talk about the budgetary assumptions next. We are mandated that our revenues must equal our expenditures. Our levy increase is to be determined by the Board of Education. We're still not there yet. Expenditures have a 5.19% increase at this point, budgeted budget of $1.8 million. So we're going to look at our expenditures a little bit. We have some decreases. The Board of Education, and once again, I will remind everyone, our Board of Education receives no payment for their services. They are completely volunteer. But due to a shift in allocations of insurances, there's a $52 savings in the Board of Education costs. Occupational education is the students who are going to BOCES for CTLE courses, and that's a $90,000 decrease.
Let's talk about that for a second, though. So those are the CTE courses. That doesn't mean we're sending fewer students. This just means the bill that we pay next year for this current year of students is less than what it was the year before. We're always a year behind in paying that bill. So it's just, we're realizing some savings next year based on CTE enrollment this year.
Then our debt service, which is our mortgage payment, that's gone down $177,000. If we looked at the decreases, now we want to look at the increases. General support, which is everything from the district office, business office, buildings and grounds, that's going up $263,000. Administration and improvements, that is the administrators in the buildings, that's going up $64,000. General education is going up $152,000. Programs for students with disabilities is going up $947,000. That will come back to us next year. We will get aid on any students that are what they consider excess cost aid. So just like Mr. Sartisia said about the costs for BOCES, we pay it in 1 year, we get paid back the next. It's what they call expense-driven aids. And then our community education, that's going up $2,000. School library information and technology, a mere $68,000. Pupil services, which is everything from their extracurriculars, the athletics, guidance counselors, that's going up $26,000. Pupil transportation, as gas prices have leveled off, it's only going up $84,000. Civic activities, this is the fitness center, it's going up $1,400, solely due to the increase in minimum wage for a part-time person. Our employee benefits, after we rebid our health insurance and had some cost savings, is going up $544,000. So our total expenditure increases are $2,156,174, less our reductions we talked about earlier of $267,996, gets our total expenditure increases to $1,888,178. Any questions? Yes.
The cost for the students with disabilities, we don't really have any control of it.
The students are mandated by law to get what they need, so you're correct.
So we do have some control, and the control that we exercise is to educate as many students as we are aptly able to do within the district. Okay, you'll recall that we actually added some positions last year, a social worker, a teacher, some aides, in order to create a behaviorally based class at our GLP. Had we not done that, the entire embodiment of that class would have been sent to out of district placements, and those costs are significant. The other, and there, but you do bring up a good point, because a lot of the cost driver to the increase in special education costs are because the rates for those out of district placements have gone up significantly, and we have no control or say over that. And these are children that we, unfortunately, we just don't have the capacity to educate in our district. They can be incredibly medically frail. They can have specific needs, and unfortunately, our district, like many, just can't educate those students within our walls here.
Previous slide, you mentioned one that was going up, that included the cost of, or maybe it was the one that you were on, that included the cost, it was extracurriculars like sports, but you also mentioned people services guidance counselor. So I was just curious, because we're eliminating a position.
That's correct.
But it's still going up by that much?
Yes.
That was the pupil services at 26,000. Yeah.
So on our revenue analysis, so there are some things that are controlled by the Board of Education: school taxes, the amount of appropriated fund balance, and reserves. Our federal aid, we're not expecting any increases in, and we're expecting our state aid to decrease by $201,887 due to the changes the governor proposed for the foundation aid formula. So last year, we finally got to a point where we were fully funded by the formula that was created in 2008, 2009. And this year they're going to reduce us because they're saying, well, wait a minute, we're going to change that formula just a little bit. We're going to not trend it as much as the current consumer price index. And we're not going to hold you harmless saying you'll get at least what you got last year. So they've reduced that for Eden. Our miscellaneous revenue is going up $253,000. A large portion of that is due to the increase in interest that we're able to get on the monies that are in our reserves. And our interfund transfer is money that was extra from projects over the years in the debt service fund that we're going to use to pay down our mortgage payments. Any questions on that?
So, yeah, go ahead.
Do you think there's any chance they could reinstate some of that stating?
That is the hope.
So we won't know until we know, and the budget is due at the end of this month. We've been warned that not to expect an on-time budget. What Laura is presenting is what we know, and that was that significant $200,000 increase in our foundation aid, our base aid. And the good news is the Assembly and the Senate, both of those houses, are diametrically opposed to what the governor put forth. We've been advised to plan in the background, so to speak, to be made whole in terms of that 200,000, but don't expect much more than that. The Senate and the Assembly, however, are recommending, well, at least one of them, a 3% increase in our foundation aid. So when you see such a great difference between the governor and the two houses, you need to expect lengthy negotiations. And who knows what comes out of those. So I would guess that we'll, if it's on time, we'll know at the end of the week. Hopefully we have some information next week, if not the week after at the latest. And this board, our next meeting is April 16th, and that's when we actually need to adopt the budget. So we'll have a lot of work to do and a lot of communicating to do in a short period of time.
So now we're going to look at our year-to-year expenditures. We're going to look at our expenditure category, what we had in our adopted budget, our proposed budget, and the dollar change. So our general support is going up $263,000. Our instructional will go up 1.1 million. Pupil transportation up 84,000. And employee benefits, debt service, civic activities, and interfund transfers up 368,000. And so you once again see our budget going from $36,409,963 up to $38,298,141, up $1,888,178. So our year-to-year revenues, the only changes you are seeing is our state aid going down $201,887. Again, as Mr. Sochicio said, that's what we know today. Our miscellaneous revenue is going up $253,000, and we're going to do planning an interfund transfer if approved for $299,000. So we're going to go from $36,409,963 up $351,727 up to $36,763,690. Wait a minute, that doesn't balance. We have a budget gap of $1,536,451 at this time. That is the work that needs to be done. So where do we go from here? When we talk about revenue, the board has two avenues, taxes or reserves, because we can't exactly go out and sell anything. We're a school district. So our property tax cap, you can have any level of tax increase that the Board of Education wants, but the amount that is under the tax cap, which means requires a simple majority to pass, the highest we can go is at 4.3% levy increase. So right now, 1% of our current levy is $157,698. 2% is double that, is $315,396. And these are at half increments all the way up to 4.3, where we could raise $678,101 and still only require 50% plus 1 to pass the levy.
So let's let that sink in for a minute. Any questions? And so, Mrs. Feldman said we can have whatever levy increase the board desires, but it's not so much what the board desires, it's what the voters approve or don't approve. And I think that's what our history has shown is let's do the best we can, maintaining the outstanding programs we have in Eden across the board, music, arts, athletics, certainly academics, but being reasonable with what we ask of our taxpayers. And I think, and I know we're gonna, whether it's the next slide or a few after, when you hear a percent increase, it seems large, but we really need to dial that back to what the actual dollars and cents are. What 3% means or what 1% means for the average $100,000 house. So that's the next slide.
Well, first we're gonna
Pretty
talk
close,
about our
that's pretty
history. We're gonna look that in the last 7 years, we have decreased every year the amount of tax rate on true value of the homes. That's after the equalization rates are in. So we were at $19.19 in 2017-18, and last year for the 23-24 budget, we were at $13.38. So even from 22-23 to 23-24, it went down 9.26%. Any questions? So now this is the screen Mr. Sorticio was talking about. Again, talking the true tax rate. So in 23-24, we just said it was at $13.38 per thousand. So a 1% would be $157,698, but only a 14-cent increase per thousand, or $14 for a $100,000 home. We're going to jump down to the 2%, and we're going to say that's $315,396. It goes up to $13.65 per thousand, and it goes up 27 cents or $27. And so this table goes all the way till we get to the 4.3, the last tax cap compliant rate that we have, where we could raise $678,101 at $13.96 per thousand, at 58-cent increase, or $58 for a $100,000 home. And because I didn't read everything, I'm just going to let you guys look at that for a minute.
Any questions, comments?
So again, just so you know, the potential tax increase district-wide on true value, the maximum as presented of 4.3 or $678,101 is $58 per 100,000, or $58 per $100,000 home, and requires voter authorization of 50% plus 1. What is the impact on the voter authorization? Because that's all the property tax cap tells you, is how much voter authorization you need in order to pass your budget. And as you can see, it's always 50% plus 1, because all of these rates are tax cap compliant. If we were to raise higher than 4.3, we would require a 60% voter authorization. Closing the gap with reserves. So we've projected where our reserve balances will be at the end of 23-24. Our projected use of them to keep it at the 843,370 that we saw in the revenue slides. So I'm just going to talk about workers' comp and then the ERS, and then jump to the bottom so that you're not listening to all the numbers. Workers' comp is gonna go from $306,549, uses $129,374, would have a projected balance of $177,175.
So, Laura, when you say uses, what do you mean specifically there? Where's that 129,374 going?
That $129,374 is going directly to the workers' comp consortium that we're part of, and that is the anticipated cost for our district to belong to them in the 24-25 school year.
Okay, so what you have listed there under projected use, that's not funds that you're recommending we put towards closing the gap.
It is because the expenses are in the budget,
Okay,
and so we're funding those expenses specifically with these reserves.
okay, so you're not unfunding a reserve to close the gap. You're using the reserve to pay for the expenditures next year.
Correct. And none of these uses are unfunding this time. They're all just using the funds to pay towards our existing bills.
Okay.
So when we talk about our employee retirement system, ERS contribution, we pay more than $485,000 a year. But we're saying we have 1.8 million, and we will utilize 485,000 of those dollars to pay for towards the bill in 24-25. And we would have 1.3 million left in that reserve at the end.
Do you know what we pay in ERS?
ERS is about, I think, $600,000
Okay,
in the budget.
so we'll say another 200,000 over that 485.
Correct.
Okay.
So then, like I said, we're gonna jump down to the bottom because we've talked about a couple of the top ones, and we're not gonna use any of the liability. We don't have any liability. We're not using anything to unfund, so that's why you see the zeros. So we're going from 5.2 million of these reserves, and this is not all our reserves. We're gonna spend 843,000 and be at 4.3 at June 30th, 2025.
So stay there for a second. So, not that I'm recommending this, but since, we're talking very openly and a number of the board members are here, they could ask us what the ramifications would be to utilize more of a reserve to cover that outstanding bill.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Do you understand that? Any questions?
Yes, because the revenue stayed the same from year to year, and we use plan. Yes, And
Some
you
of them, some of them.
right. The employee benefit, we cannot touch without controller's permission. And we are not, and you have to be overfunded, and we are underfunded in that reserve. So we couldn't use that.
So each one of those categories, whether we could use it or not, depends on rule.
Correct.
Hmm.
Any other questions? So these will be propositions 2 and 3. These are voter authorized reserves that everyone is familiar with seeing every year. We buy buses, we buy equipment, we buy technology devices, and we don't need voter authorization to put money into it for the 10 years that it's active, but we need voter authorization to take away from the reserve, and we need voter authorization to fund a new reserve of these at the end of 10 years. I say that because our capital project building fund, as of June of 24, we can no longer add funds to it. We can only expend from it. And we will have a proposition for a new reserve that we talked about at the last meeting. So our buses and equipment, we've been quite frugal about going from 1.9 down to 1.3. Capital technology going from 435,000 down to 192,000. So we were going to ask the voters for permission to spend $845,555 of these reserves, lowering them from 4.7 to 3.8. So our total reserve balances will go from 9.9 down to 8.2 million, if this is the path the board chooses.
That has no impact on the taxes that people pay.
Correct.
Correct.
It's just asking permission to use money we've set aside for a specific purpose for that purpose.
And is that on the ballot when they vote?
Yes.
What I just said, that simple
No, the-
language,
No tax implication. Is that actually on there?
No. It's very legalese
Hi-
from the attorneys.
historically, and hopefully history repeats itself, those propositions typically have a much higher passing rate than anything else.
Right,
Um,
but it's still like, so frustrating. I know it's illegal, but like, it's just, be so nice to put on there. This is not gonna affect your
There's
taxes.
somebody in the skies putting flyers on.
Right?
windshields.
And that's also our job to educate people.
True.
Yeah.
Right.
So if we keep reminding them of it.
And as Laura mentioned too, there will be a request to the voters to authorize a new capital reserve, which may or may not be funded. And you'll recall at the last meeting, I suggested that we ask for a $15 million reserve over the next 10 years. And when we're able to, if we're able to, we'll fund it simply to offset the cost of future projects.
And yeah, and I know we usually send something out to all the voters beforehand, so like, we can just make sure it's very like layman's terms, like very simple, plain language.
But you've done that, haven't you?
Yes, we do each
Yeah.
year.
You
Yeah.
translate it.
Yes. What are you going to, what does it mean? Here's what you're gonna see.
Cause I know even for me, it's like reading an insurance policy.
You're good.
I need you to talk to me like I'm 6.
So these are the decisions that need to be made for the, oops,
April 16th.
yep, April 16th budget adoption. Sorry about that. April 1st, we're hoping for a state on-time budget. We're not counting on it yet. We need to know whether to reduce expenditures, how to increase revenues, increase property school taxes, if so, how much, utilize reserves and fund balance, how much. And as you can see, the lady in the corner, it's a juggling act. And then this is simply the rest of the calendar.
So, because there's such a lack of final information, I anticipate that when we do meet, when the board meets on the 16th, which again is budget adoption night, we're gonna have to have some options prepared for the board to discuss. Different scenarios, if you will, in terms of tax rate and whatnot, expenditures. I doubt I'll have information about the grant at that point. But if we can have that, we will. Okay. Other questions or comments?
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.